Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. I mentioned in a previous video that I was completely intrigued with works that one of my friends calls Shakespeare adjacent, be they films like 10 Things I Hate About You, or Ethan Hawke's modern setting for Hamlet, or books like the new Hogarth Shakespeare series of novels riffing on Shakespearean stories. Riff, a word very frequently used in jazz, which means to improvise over an established melody, is a really appropriate word here, I think, because of its musical connotations. Instead of calling these books retellings, Hogarth Press chose to call these books covers of the original plays, using the terminology of musicians who record songs made famous by other artists, but seek to add something directly personal to their new version. The first book published in the Hogarth Shakespeare series was Jeanette Winterson's The Gap of Time, a cover of my favorite Shakespeare play, The Winter's Tale. I'll link below to my full video about the play, but today I want to talk about Winterson and her novel specifically. Winterson chose this play because, like me, she's held the play very close to her heart for a long time. As she says, The Winter's Tale has been a key text in her life, partially because she, like the young female character Perdita in Shakespeare's play, was a foundling. One abandoned as a baby by one's biological parents, but also one who has been found, who has had the opportunity to start fresh, with a newly adopted possibility for the future. I fell in love with the work of Jeanette Winterson when a college friend recommended her very short novel, Sexing the Cherry, to me when we were in school. I enjoyed it so much that I found a copy of The Passion the very next day, which I loved even more and eventually gifted to many of my reading friends and recommended to many more. Although I've not read it in a very long time, and I suppose I might not respond to it in quite the same way I did then, my memory of her writing is that it was stunningly poetic, that plot lines were exciting, and characters were well drawn and deeply resonant. While not nearly as poetic as those two short novels, Winterson's first memoir, Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, opened discussions among my friends about issues of sexuality and sexual identity at a time when those issues were not nearly as common as they are today. She also made this historian of the United States South think about how evangelical religious communities functioned in a different country. I've not yet read Winterson's follow-up memoir, but I realize I really need to. Given that I love The Winter's Tale, and I've loved the work of Jeanette Winterson, I'm not sure why I put off reading her retelling, The Gap of Time. Perhaps I feared I would expect too much and be disappointed. When both my Shakespeare-obsessed son and my Winterson-loving husband recommended The Gap of Time, I should have just set myself down and read it immediately. I did not. The magic of BookTube, and Shaketube specifically, pulled the book to the top of my TBR. Thank goodness. I really enjoyed many parts of this novel. There were parts I found a bit frustrating, and some that I even found off-putting. I'm not sure the book would have been nearly as powerful or nearly as interesting if I was less familiar with Shakespeare's play. Actually, familiarity with Shakespeare's other major works would be useful, since Winterson makes a fair number of small and large allusions to other works as well. Perhaps the most interesting part of the novel may sound like a spoiler to some, but it's information that's presented in the very first few pages, and it's almost to be expected that Winterson would explore the ways in which the text here might allow some cracking of the idea of heteronormativity. Leo and Zeno, Winterson's versions of Leontes and Polixenes, were lovers, a relationship acted out at least for a brief period while they were in school together. The layers of long-term homoeroticism and same-sex romantic love played out while there's also an overlapping heteroeroticism and heteroromantic love helps explain Leontes' quick and intensely expressed jealousy. Too hot, Leontes says in Shakespeare's original, recognizing that his jealousy is an overdrive. Winterson helps her readers start to understand where his reaction comes from. He loves both his wife and his friend, and he's long suspected that they also loved each other. Another part of Winterson's book that I found intriguing was her use of ethnic and religious identity in her portrayal of characters. Sometimes I actually found it frustrating because it was unclear how the identities played out in any way other than labeling. But at other times, I saw how she was making links to Shakespeare's original. I mentioned in my video on The Winter's Tale that there might be some resonance between the character of Paulina and the figure of Paul in the New Testament. Winterson turns that on its head a bit, turning her Pauline into a Jewish woman, frequently throwing out Yiddish terms. Leo identifies her not with the Christian New Testament, but with the Old Testament, that is the Jewish Bible, accusing her of making him walk through the desert for 40 years before he's allowed to enter his Holy Land of reconciliation with his childhood friend, his daughter, and his spouse. Another moment I loved is when two characters, new to each other and new to each other's cultures, came together over music. Both are musicians, but one came from a tradition of reading sheet music and playing by the book, while the other embraces a more open style of improvisation. The two characters learn to communicate across that split. The improviser teaches the strict music reader to play by ear, that is, really listen to what's happening to the people around them and respond authentically in a way that creates harmony and the beginnings of healing. I'd love to hear if you have read any of the other Hogarth Shakespeare books. I'm now eager to pick up some of the other volumes, especially Anne Tyler's retelling of The Taming of the Shrew and Margaret Atwood's retelling of The Tempest. Have you read them? Tell me about your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining me today. Tomorrow is the first day of Victober, when we join together for a month of celebrating Victorian authors, from the Brontes to Dickens, from Gaskell to Hardy, from Trollope to George Eliot. I can't wait. See you soon.